All right, welcome back. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeting this earlier this week. DIA, that's the Defense Intelligence Assessment, has now publicly confirmed what I said in January. Al-Qaeda's global terror operations is headquartered in Iran with the permission of the Iranian regime. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is negotiating to lift terror sanctions on Iran. That's not America first. And not only is it not America first, it sounds insane, doesn't it? We're going to bring in our friend Christian Whiton, former Trump administration senior advisor, and Alireza Jafarzadeh, deputy director for the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Christian, we're going to start with you. It seems so crazy that we're going to talk about lifting sanctions, talk about going into a deal with a country who it appears is now the headquarters for Al-Qaeda. I mean, why are we so dumb with Iran in this administration?
It's this odd theological desire on the part of the Biden administration to undo everything that Donald Trump did, even if it was unequivocally good, like establishing peace in the Middle East and putting the Islamist regime in Iran on the back foot. You know, if you look at the nuclear deal, the terrible parts about it, Iran has said it's going to enrich to 60% HEU. You may ask, well, how could they do that? Weren't they supposed to be deprived of the means to do that under the magical 2015 deal? Well, no, they weren't. And also, as you point out, with sanctions, they're not just looking at taking sanctions off that were enacted for its nuclear program. They're talking about removing sanctions that relate to terrorism. And they are completely unreformed, this regime, when it comes to the export of terrorism. If you look in places like Syria, if you look in places like Iraq, this is still a regime that is determined to export jihadism and Islamist tyranny.
Yeah, it's certainly, I couldn't agree more. Alireza, over the weekend, the U.S. denied any deal with Iran to ease sanctions to get 4 hostages back from Iran. This is what Jen Psaki had to say about that yesterday.
Those are often indirect discussions, or we have our own channels, of course, and they're separate from the nuclear discussions in Vienna. But it is a commitment and a desire by this administration to certainly bring those hostages back.
So showing at least, some kind of intelligence there on what's going on. What do you think happens with this? Do you think Iran thinks they can get a fast one over on the Biden administration?
Well, the strategy of the Iranian regime is to boil down everything only to the nuclear deal, because that's what they want. They want to get back to the 2015 nuclear deal, get all the sanctions lifted. And in order to do that, their strategy, because they're extremely weak inside Iran, they have lost their clout in the region, and a lot of the facts about their activities have now become public, and Congress is opposed to it. So what they're doing, they're rationing up pressure. They're firing missiles in Iraq against the Americans. They're stepping up their activities on the nuclear side, hoping that by building pressure on the Biden administration will take the bait and lift the sanctions. But the reality is that this is not 2015. This regime is much weaker inside Iran. There have been several rounds of protests by the Iranian people calling for change, and there's corruption widespread all over the country. A number of Arab and Muslim nations have formed their own coalitions against the Iranian regime. Even the public Arab street are protesting against the Iranian regime. And now Congress knows facts about the Iran regime, nuclear program that they didn't know at the time. There were at least 3 sites in Iran, according to the IAEA, that were never declared to the negotiators in 2015.
Right. Alireza, stay with you for just 1 second, and I need a quick answer on this. The story about John Kerry potentially giving some of the Israeli moves, their troop movements, to Iran years ago when he was in the Obama administration. If that's true, what is your take?
Well, I think it's just another evidence that how the Iran regime operates. They want to trap everyone. They want to get current or former officials involved and get them on their side. But the fact of the matter is that, as experience has shown, anytime you get into this kind of agreements or dealings with the Iran regime, you will be the loser. The Iran regime will play you, will deceive you, and just take advantage of it.
Yeah, and Christian, real quick again, John Kerry is not very good at diplomacy. He's not very good at anything, in my opinion. Are they hoping to have another John Kerry-like person to deal with in this administration?
Sure. Yeah, they love dealing with useful idiots, and you're seeing them come out of the woodwork from the administration and from left-wing think tanks in Washington. There's a presidential election, quote unquote, coming up in Iran in June, perhaps, and you already have people saying, well, we need to rush and get this nuclear deal through and get this to empower the moderates. That's the oldest story in the book. It's been around since 1979. Alireza can tell you there are no moderates in this government.
No, that's very true. Christian Whiton and Alireza Jafarzadeh. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
All right.